I have already told you about the geostrategic position that the island of Sri Lanka occupies and about the consequent developmental potential that this island has. The interesting question then is how come this developmental potential has not as yet been realized? This is a question that many specialists in the field of development practice often discuss, and most of them admit that they are at a loss to explain how this failure has occurred and how it continues to occur. It is not a question of lack of resources. It is not a question of global goodwill. It is something else. And maybe more than just one factor that has led to a continuing inability of the people of this island to realize the developmental potential that the island's geostrategic location makes available to them. One of the factors that I think lies at the root of this problem is the fact that has only recently come to light that the national average IQ of the population of the island is only 79. Now, an IQ of 79 means that it is going to be very difficult for you to understand and to follow processes or to internalize training. This is something that has come to light only recently. And to me, it seems to explain quite a bit about this continuing, ongoing failure to realize the potential offered by this island. At the time the island got its independence, there were processes in place, perhaps not throughout the island, but at least along its commercial networks. But soon after the island received its independence, a certain perception began to grow. According to this perception, there is no need for processes. And in fact, processes are a nuisance and a hindrance. According to this perception, there is no need for us to do anything in any particular way. We can do things the way we like. Now, when this perspective began to spread, and when people started to do things as they liked, things started to go wrong. And when things went wrong, there was no attempt made to reinstitutionalize the processes that had collapsed. But instead, some kind of patchwork solutions were found. And this attitude of finding patchwork solutions to get by for the moment has come to be called shape. Shape. S-H-A-P-E. Shaping things. You must have heard your children talking about shape. How they do things shaping. Now this shape has become a philosophy. And it has spread throughout the mental structures of the population of this island. Not surprisingly, it has spread into all the social institutions, and as a result, we have seen a collapse of the rule of law. One can commit any crime that one decides to commit, and one can then shape it. And because this philosophy of shape has become so widespread and so deeply rooted in the mental structures of the population of this island, everybody around you will help you to shape your crime. And they too will expect you to help them to shape the various crimes that they engage in. The emergence and consolidation of what we can call this philosophy of shape has contributed to a very large extent to the failure to realize the potential of the island. But it is not the only factor by any means. There are other factors as well. Along with the rejection of processes, the refusal to follow processes, procedures, and time frames, there was also a rejection of global values and norms. Conventions such as politeness, kindness, decency, honesty, integrity, all of these were rejected. Sometimes on ideological grounds. Which of course raises the question as to how well those ideologies that were used to justify this rejection were really understood by those who were advocating them. Remember, we are talking about a population with an average IQ level of 79. And some of these ideologies that were used to justify this rejection of global norms and values are fairly complex ideologies. There may have been a few amongst the island's population who understood these ideologies. But by and large, it is quite clear that the ideologies were not understood. There was also a biased understanding of history that was propagated throughout the education system of the island. And the bias was towards the nation state. The world was looked at in terms of Sri Lanka. There was no capacity shown anywhere to understand history as the history of the human species. In fact, very few people know that there is something called the human species. Hardly anybody in the island talks about the human species. They talk about races. They do not understand that this is a completely outdated and rejected concept. So they may tell you about the human race, but they do not know that there is a human species. And they do not understand that this human species as a whole has participated in the historical process and moved towards a global civilization. Out of this biased understanding of history comes a very strange understanding of freedom. Freedom is seen as freedom from the rule of law, freedom from globally accepted norms and values, and freedom to engage in acts regardless of their consequences. This is what freedom has become to the people of this island. Freedom means freedom from this law. We don't want the rule of law. We want to be free to do whatever we like, whatever we please. Now, this led to a complete loss of direction. And this is what we saw over the last 5 years. It was becoming evident over the last decade, but over the last 5 years we saw it very clearly. We saw how the population of the island, the majority of the population of the island, not everybody perhaps, but the majority, actually made an attempt to go back in history and resurrect the past. There was an attempt to create a feudal dynasty and re-institutionalize feudal structures of society. It was something quite amazing to behold, and there was much to be learned from it. It showed that some human beings actually thought it was a good thing to go back to the past. That these human beings preferred autocratic, dictatorial rule to the rule of law. And that they preferred personality-driven systems of management to process-driven ones. Yes, you will see this in the corporate sector as well. If you visit Sri Lanka and if you go into their corporate sector, you will find out, you will see for yourself that more than 99% of the companies have no idea of what a process is, why a process is required. It is totally personality-driven. The perception that rules, that reigns, is put the right man in the right place at the right time and he will perform. Nothing about processes, nothing about human resource development training in order to follow processes, nothing about process guidance or process driving or process formulation, process support, process sustenance, process development, nothing about all of this. So it is not just the government that I am talking about. It is the whole of the island society that has rejected processes and consequently rejected the rule of law and consequently rejected all the values and norms of the global civilization of the human species. What we saw is a small population trying to secede from the species, trying to break away, trying to reject what the species has built up over the last 15,000 years by way of civilization and say, we're going to do it our way. We're not going to follow what you've been doing. And these people took pride in thumbing their noses at the global civilization of the human species. It was the most remarkable thing to watch. And it still is. It's still happening. Now, this did not happen overnight. It took about 3 generations. First, just at the time of and after the island received its independence, there was a generation which, so to speak, took us on this ride. And then, this generation which took us on this ride was followed by another one which went on the ride. They bought into it. They thought it was reality. Most of them died. And all of them were impoverished. And all of them have been deeply affected psychologically. That was the generation that went on the ride. And then they were followed by another generation. That is the generation you see now growing up in their early to mid 20s, and they have no clue as to what is going on. And they have no clue as to what is possible for them. And they have no clue as to what can be done with what is left of the destruction. What I've told you is just a very brief, almost point by point description. I would love to elaborate and go into the detailed stories of the content. I'm just giving you the structure. The content is even more interesting. But that would be an extremely large project, and it would not be possible to communicate it by means of a short video like this. It would require several volumes and years of labor. And given the speed at which developments are occurring, I don't think I have the time to sit down and produce those volumes. Like all my videos, the content that I articulate is open to criticism and to question. In particular, I welcome your questions because they make me think. And as I have said before, I will try my best to answer all the questions that are raised. So please do not hesitate to ask questions. Thank you.